Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into the hushed, sun-drenched courtyards of 16th century Istanbul, a place where silk whispers against marble and the scent of jasmine drifts on the evening breeze. Imagine yourself, a humble servant, perhaps gliding through the Topkapi Palace, its sprawling elegance a labyrinth of secrets and shadows. You pass by elaborate gilded cages where nightingales sing, past fountains where water trickles endlessly, each sound a gentle lullaby for tired ears. But don't be fooled by the serene atmosphere. Every corner of this magnificent abode, every shadowed alcove holds the potential for intrigue. A simple message, if intercepted, could mean ruin. A misheard whisper, a glance held too long, and your life, or the life of someone far more important, could hang in the balance. You probably wouldn't survive a week, honestly. The stakes were incredibly high, higher than a sultan's turban. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling up to it, drop your location and the local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where you're all drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're here in the heart of the Ottoman Empire, where the air itself seems to shimmer with unseen messages. Your role, however minor, is to be a part of this grand, intricate mechanism. The Sultan, the very sun around whom this universe revolves, relies on absolute discretion. Every edict, every strategic command, every piece of vital intelligence must travel securely. You see the Grand Vizier, a man burdened by the weight of the empire, pacing in the private gardens, his brow furrowed. He needs to send instructions to a distant general, thousands of miles away, about a critical siege. But the roads are long, bandit-ridden, and teeming with potential spies from rival empires, the Habsburgs, the Safavids, the Venetians, all eager to pry open the Ottoman treasury of information. This isn't like sending a text message, my friend. There's no encryption app on your Ottoman-era smartphone. The very act of communication, even a seemingly innocuous note, becomes a dance of shadows. The Sultan, a figure both revered and feared, operates in a world where information is power, and the leak of even a minor detail could destabilize an entire region. Think of it. A message might instruct a governor on how to handle a rebellious province or detail the movements of the imperial fleet. Imagine a courier, dusty and weary, arriving at a distant post, clutching a scroll that could change the fate of an empire. But what if that scroll falls into the wrong hands? What if the message is altered? These were the very real, very pressing anxieties that kept sultans and their most trusted advisors awake at night. One mainstream historical fact to consider is that the Ottoman Empire, at its zenith, stretched across 3 continents, from the Balkans to North Africa and deep into the Middle East. This vast expanse made centralized control and reliable communication an immense logistical challenge. Keeping such a sprawling entity cohesive required more than just military might. It demanded an intricate web of information flow. Now, for a quirky tidbit, did you know that pigeons were sometimes used for carrying messages? but they were notoriously unreliable and often ended up as someone's dinner. Not exactly the most secure network. Historians still argue whether the complexity of Ottoman communication systems was primarily a response to internal intrigue or external threats. Was it more about keeping secrets from ambitious viziers or from the prying eyes of European spies? Perhaps it was a delicate dance between both, a constant balancing act in an environment where trust was a luxury and secrecy a necessity. You might see a seemingly casual conversation between two courtiers, their voices low, their hands gesturing almost imperceptibly. Are they merely discussing the weather, or are they subtly exchanging a coded signal, a prearranged phrase that holds a deeper, hidden meaning? As you continue your silent stroll through the palace grounds, the sheer scale of the Topkapi becomes apparent. It's not just a palace, it's a city within a city, a self contained universe humming with activity. There are kitchens that feed thousands, stables housing magnificent Arabian horses, barracks for the elite janissaries, and intricate gardens that seem to stretch to the horizon. Every individual here, from the lowliest stable hand to the highest ranking vizier, plays a part in the grand machinery of the empire, and within this complex mechanism, secrets are currency. The closer you are to the Sultan, the more valuable your access to information, and consequently, the more dangerous your position. You might overhear a hushed conversation between two eunuchs by a reflecting pool. They speak in allegories, their words seemingly innocent, yet their eyes dart around, constantly scanning for eavesdroppers. This isn't paranoia, it's a necessary precaution. Palace intrigue was a constant, simmering undercurrent. Plots to depose a grand vizier, whispers of rebellion in a far flung province, even romantic entanglements that could compromise powerful figures. All of this required the utmost secrecy. Imagine trying to keep a secret in a place where hundreds, if not thousands, of people live and work in close quarters, their lives intertwined. It's like living in a very opulent, very dangerous, very large fishbowl. One common historical fact is that the harem itself, often sensationalized, was also a highly structured and hierarchical environment where alliances were forged and information was meticulously controlled. The women within it, from the Sultan's mother to his concubines, often wielded significant, though often unseen, power. For a quirky tidbit, it's said that some sultans would have their food tasted by multiple servants before eating it, not just for poison, but to ensure no secret messages were hidden within the dishes themselves. Imagine trying to pass a coded message in a particularly spicy lamb stew. Historians still argue whether the elaborate systems of palace surveillance were primarily a tool of autocratic control or a legitimate defense against the very real threats of treason and foreign espionage. Was the Sultan truly safe, or was he perpetually looking over his shoulder? You see a courtier casually adjusting his turban, his gaze sweeping across the courtyard. Is he merely making himself presentable, or is he conducting a silent inventory of faces, assessing who is where, who is with whom? Every interaction has the potential for a hidden agenda. Consider the atmosphere, the constant, low hum of activity, punctuated by the call to prayer from the distant minarets. Even these sacred sounds, as we'll later explore, could be repurposed for clandestine communication. The air is thick with expectation, with ambition, and with the silent agreement that what happens within these walls stays within these walls. The Sultan's word is law, but how that law is transmitted, how it reaches the furthest corners of his vast domain without being compromised, is the true challenge. It's a bit like playing a game of historical telephone, but with much higher stakes than a silly misunderstanding. You walk past the Divan Humayun, the Imperial Council, where the empire's most crucial decisions are made. Here, arguments are presented, strategies debated, and judgments passed. But even within this inner sanctum, the need for discreet communication is paramount. Imagine a message about a critical military maneuver. It can't simply be shouted across the palace grounds. It must be delivered, understood, and acted upon, all while remaining completely undetectable to any unauthorized ears. This required not just trusted messengers, but an entire system of codes, signals, and methods that made the uninitiated feel like they were listening to gibberish, or worse, just everyday conversations. The stakes are personal too. If you were a messenger and your message was intercepted and compromised, your life would be forfeit. It wasn't just about the empire, it was about survival. This pressure created an environment ripe for innovation in secrecy, a constant push and pull between those trying to uncover secrets and those trying to guard them. It's a game of wits played out on the grand stage of the Ottoman Empire, where the silence often spoke louder than any shouted command. Before the elaborate codes and ciphers that would later define Ottoman secrecy, there were simpler, more direct methods of communication. Imagine a time before the telegraph, before even widespread literacy, when the fastest way to send a message was by foot or by hoof. You see a courier, his face weathered, his clothes dusty, galloping through the palace gates on a magnificent Arabian steed. He clutches a sealed scroll, its wax imprint bearing the Sultan's tugra, the imperial signature. This scroll contains vital news, perhaps from a distant governor reporting on a tax collection or a military commander detailing the progress of a siege. These couriers were the original Ottoman information superhighway, but they were far from foolproof. The journey was long and perilous, fraught with the risk of bandits, treacherous terrain, and of course, enemy agents. A lost or intercepted message could have dire consequences. The messenger himself was a key part of the security. His loyalty was paramount. They were often handpicked, trusted individuals, sometimes even members of the Sultan's personal guard. You might see them training in the palace courtyard, their horsemanship impeccable, their movements precise, their faces grimly determined. They knew the weight of their responsibility. Beyond couriers, there were other methods, less secure but useful for shorter distances. Flag signals, for instance, could transmit simple messages between watchtowers or ships. Imagine yourself on the Bosphorus, the strait that divides Istanbul, observing a series of flags fluttering from the Galata Tower. To the untrained eye, it might seem like mere decoration, but to those who knew the code, each color and pattern held a specific meaning. This was a visual language, limited in complexity, but effective for quick communication. Another method involved the use of smoke signals, especially in more rural areas. A puff of smoke rising from a distant hilltop could convey a warning, a call for help, or a simple acknowledgement. It was a rudimentary system, but it was immediate. Think of it as the Ottoman equivalent of a text message, but one that could be seen for miles. However, these methods lacked nuance. They were suitable for basic information, but not for complex strategies or sensitive details. One mainstream historical fact is that the Ottoman postal system, known as the menzilhane, was highly organized, with relay stations set up along major routes to ensure the swift delivery of official correspondence. These stations provided fresh horses and rest for the couriers, allowing them to cover vast distances with remarkable speed. But even this system was vulnerable. For a quirky tidbit, it said that some messengers would swallow small, rolled up messages in case they were captured, a rather unpleasant, if effective, way to keep a secret. Historians still debate whether the Ottomans relied more on speed or security in these early communication methods. Was it more important to get the message there quickly, even if it meant risking interception, or to prioritize secrecy, even if it meant delays? You watch a scribe meticulously copying a document, his hand moving with practiced precision. He's not just writing, he's guarding a secret. Every stroke of his pen, every flourish, is a potential point of vulnerability. The challenge was to find a balance, to develop methods that were both fast and secure. This need spurred innovation, leading to the development of more sophisticated codes and ciphers, methods that would transform the way the Ottomans communicated and protected their secrets. The era of simple couriers and flag signals was giving way to a new age of cryptographic complexity, a world where words themselves became weapons and the ability to decipher them a matter of life and death. As the Ottoman Empire expanded its reach, stretching its influence across vast new territories and incorporating diverse populations, the simple methods of communication became increasingly insufficient. Imagine the sheer administrative nightmare governing Anatolia, the Balkans, North Africa, and parts of Eastern Europe, all while keeping a watchful eye on potential rebellions, managing trade routes, and coordinating military campaigns. The sheer volume of critical information increased exponentially. It was no longer just about sending a message from the palace to a nearby outpost. It was about maintaining control over an empire that spanned thousands of miles. You, as a trusted advisor, feel the weight of this expansion. The Sultan needs to know immediately if a new taxation policy is causing unrest in Egypt, or if a rogue pirate fleet is disrupting shipping lanes in the Mediterranean. These are not trivial matters. They are the gears that keep the immense Ottoman machine grinding forward. Relying on a lone courier, however swift, or a simple flag signal, however visible, was like trying to put out a forest fire with a teacup. The scale of the challenge demanded a more sophisticated solution. The political landscape was also growing more complex. European powers were becoming increasingly interested in Ottoman affairs, sending their own spies and diplomats to gather intelligence. The Habsburgs in Austria, the rising power of Russia, and the ever present maritime might of Venice and Genoa were all vying for influence, constantly probing for weaknesses in the Ottoman armor. This external pressure only intensified the need for ironclad secrecy in communications. You can almost feel the eyes of unseen agents lurking in the shadows, listening for any slip of the tongue, any misplaced document. It's a bit like trying to keep a secret in a very large, very nosy neighborhood. One mainstream historical fact is that the Ottoman Empire reached its peak territorial expansion during the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent in the 16th century, which directly correlated with a heightened need for secure and efficient administrative communication. This was not just about military orders, but also about managing trade, collecting taxes, and administering justice across a sprawling and diverse population. For a quirky tidbit, some diplomatic messages were apparently written on very thin pieces of silk and then rolled up tightly and sewn into the hem of clothing or even hidden inside hollowed out coins, making them incredibly difficult to detect without a thorough and potentially suspicious search. Historians still argue whether the growing complexity of Ottoman communication systems was primarily driven by the internal need for administrative efficiency or the external pressure from rival empires. Was it about governing better or about defending against espionage? Perhaps it was a bit of both, a constant interplay between the demands of empire building and the ever present threat of information leaks. You might see a cartographer, his hands smudged with ink, meticulously drawing new maps of conquered territories. These maps aren't just geographical representations, they are blueprints for control, and the information they contain is just as sensitive as any battle plan. The very success of the Ottoman Empire, its vastness and wealth, inadvertently created its greatest communication challenge. Every new conquest, every new trade route, every new province brought with it a fresh set of eyes and ears that needed to be managed, and crucially, circumvented if they belonged to an enemy. The humble courier, once the backbone of communication, was simply too vulnerable for the grand scale of imperial secrets. It was time for whispers to become encoded, for words to transform into riddles, and for the Ottoman mind to embrace the subtle art of cryptography. The silence of coded messages was about to become the empire's new loudest weapon. The stage is set for the rise of Ottoman cryptography, a fascinating chapter in the history of secret communication. You feel a subtle shift in the palace air, a new layer of complexity settling in. No longer are messages merely carried, they are transformed. The very words become puzzles, their true meaning hidden beneath layers of carefully constructed code. This isn't about making a letter hard to read. It's about making it impossible to understand without the key. The origins of Ottoman cryptographic methods are, like many historical innovations, somewhat shrouded in the mists of time. However, it's clear that they didn't invent the concept of codes from scratch. The ancient world had rudimentary ciphers, and the Arab Islamic world, with its rich tradition of scholarship, had already made significant advancements in mathematics and linguistics, which laid a crucial foundation for cryptanalysis, the art of breaking codes. The Ottomans, being pragmatic and keen learners, absorbed and adapted these earlier ideas, refining them to suit their unique imperial needs. Imagine a scholar hunched over a parchment in a dimly lit room, not studying ancient texts, but devising intricate substitution tables. He's meticulously replacing each letter of the alphabet with another, or with a number, or even with a seemingly random symbol. This is the birth of the Ottoman cipher, a system designed to confound anyone but the intended recipient. It's like turning a perfectly sensible sentence into a string of nonsensical squiggles, a linguistic magic trick. One mainstream historical fact is that early Ottoman ciphers often employed monoalphabetic substitution, where each letter of the plain text is consistently replaced by another letter or symbol. Think of it as a simple Caesar cipher, where every A becomes a D, every B becomes an E, and so on. But the Ottomans quickly moved beyond these basic forms, understanding their vulnerability. For a quirky tidbit, some of these early ciphers reportedly used combinations of obscure Arabic numerals or even certain calligraphic flourishes to represent letters, making them not only coded but also aesthetically unique. Imagine trying to decipher a beautiful piece of art. Historians still argue whether the initial impetus for developing more complex ciphers came from a direct interaction with European cryptographic methods, or if it was an organic evolution driven purely by internal necessity. Did they learn from their Venetian rivals, or did they invent their own advanced systems independently? It's a bit like wondering if they came up with baklava on their own or got a hint from a neighbor. Regardless, the result was a system that became increasingly sophisticated. You might envision a high ranking scribe, known as a divan katibi, entrusted with this delicate art. He's not just a copyist, he's a cryptographer, holding the keys to the empire's most guarded secrets. He knows the substitution tables by heart, the intricate permutations, the specific arrangements of letters that would turn gibberish back into clear commands. This wasn't a skill taught to just anyone. It was a closely guarded trade, passed down to only the most loyal and intelligent individuals. The sophistication wasn't just in the substitution itself, but in the layers. A message might be encoded once, then the encoded message might be re-encoded using a different key or even a different type of cipher. It was like wrapping a secret in multiple layers of protective parchment, each layer requiring its own specific knowledge to unravel. This complex system would become the silent backbone of the vast Ottoman administration, allowing the Sultan to rule his sprawling empire with a degree of secrecy that was, for its time, remarkably effective. Now, let's hone in on one of the most intriguing and subtle methods of Ottoman communication, the muezzin code. Imagine, if you will, standing in a bustling market square in Istanbul, the aroma of spices and roasting meat filling the air, the sounds of haggling merchants and distant street performers, creating a rich tapestry of noise. Above it all, from the towering minaret of a nearby mosque, comes the haunting, melodic call of the muezzin, summoning the faithful to prayer. To you, it's a sacred, familiar sound, a timeless part of daily life, but to a select few, it might have been much more. This wasn't just a call to worship. For certain highly sensitive messages, It could be a carefully disguised cipher. The beauty of the muezzin's call is its public nature. It's expected, it's ubiquitous, and it's deeply ingrained in the culture. This very public visibility made it an ingenious cover for secret communication. How could you hide a message in plain sight? By subtly altering something that everyone hears but few truly scrutinize. The core idea of the muezzin code revolved around minute, prearranged variations in the call to prayer. This could involve subtle changes in the length of pauses between phrases, the emphasis on certain syllables, a slightly different intonation on a particular word, or even the number of repetitions of a specific part of the adhan. Think of it as a musical cipher where the notes are always the same, but the rhythm or dynamics change ever so slightly to convey a hidden meaning. It's like someone sending you a coded message by slightly humming a familiar tune, faster or slower. For instance, a prolonged pause after a specific phrase might indicate that a certain trade shipment has arrived. A repeated word could signal the presence of a foreign dignitary or even an enemy spy in the city. The subtlety was key. These variations had to be imperceptible to the general public, yet crystal clear to the trained ear of the intended recipient, who would be listening with a pre-arranged codebook in mind. One mainstream historical fact is that the call to prayer, the adhan, is delivered 5 times a day from mosques, marking the times for salat, prayer. Its structure and traditional melody are well established, making any deviation potentially significant to a trained listener. For a quirky tidbit, some accounts suggest that specific muezzins were trained from childhood not only in vocalization, but also in memorizing these intricate, subtle variations for coded messages. Imagine having a job where your singing could literally change the course of an empire. Historians still argue whether the muezzin code was a widely implemented formal system or a more informal ad hoc method used only for highly critical, short burst communications. Was it a sophisticated, empire wide network or a localized emergency measure? Regardless, the concept highlights the ingenuity employed to leverage seemingly innocuous daily rituals for purposes of state secrecy. You can almost feel the tension as you listen to the call, wondering if this particular Adan carries a hidden message, a silent instruction from the Sultan himself, meant only for the ears of a chosen few. It's a reminder that in an age without electronic communication, human ingenuity was the ultimate encryption device. Now, let's hone in on one of the most intriguing and subtle methods of Ottoman communication, the muezzin code. Imagine, if you will, standing in a bustling market square in Istanbul, the aroma of spices and roasting meat filling the air, the sounds of haggling merchants and distant street performers, creating a rich tapestry of noise. Above it all, from the towering minaret of a nearby mosque, comes the haunting, melodic call of the muezzin, summoning the faithful to prayer. To you, it's a sacred, familiar sound, a timeless part of daily life, but to a select few, it might have been much more. This wasn't just a call to worship. For certain highly sensitive messages, it could be a carefully disguised cipher. The beauty of the muezzin's call is its public nature. It's expected, it's ubiquitous, and it's deeply ingrained in the culture. This very public visibility made it an ingenious cover for secret communication. How could you hide a message in plain sight? By subtly altering something that everyone hears but few truly scrutinize. The core idea of the Muezzin code revolved around minute, prearranged variations in the call to prayer. This could involve subtle changes in the length of pauses between phrases, the emphasis on certain syllables, a slightly different intonation on a particular word, or even the number of repetitions of a specific part of the adhan. Think of it as a musical cipher where the notes are always the same, but the rhythm or dynamics change ever so slightly to convey a hidden meaning. It's like someone sending you a coded message by slightly humming a familiar tune, faster or slower. For instance, a prolonged pause after a specific phrase might indicate that a certain trade shipment has arrived. A repeated word could signal the presence of a foreign dignitary or even an enemy spy in the city. The subtlety was key. These variations had to be imperceptible to the general public, yet crystal clear to the trained ear of the intended recipient, who would be listening with a pre-arranged codebook in mind. One mainstream historical fact is that the call to prayer, the adhan, is delivered 5 times a day from mosques, marking the times for salat, prayer. Its structure and traditional melody are well established, making any deviation potentially significant to a trained listener. For a quirky tidbit, some accounts suggest that specific muezzins were trained from childhood not only in vocalization, but also in memorizing these intricate, subtle variations for coded messages. Imagine having a job where your singing could literally change the course of an empire. Historians still argue whether the Muezzin code was a widely implemented formal system or a more informal ad hoc method used only for highly critical, short burst communications. Was it a sophisticated, empire wide network or a localized emergency measure? Regardless, the concept highlights the ingenuity employed to leverage seemingly innocuous daily rituals for purposes of state secrecy. You can almost feel the tension as you listen to the call, wondering if this particular Adan carries a hidden message, a silent instruction from the Sultan himself, meant only for the ears of a chosen few. It's a reminder that in an age without electronic communication, human ingenuity was the ultimate encryption device. While the muezzin's call might have carried whispers of state secrets, the very fabric of daily life within the Topkapi Palace and across the empire was also subtly intertwined with the need for discreet communication. You, as an observer, begin to notice that even the most mundane interactions could potentially hide a deeper meaning. It's not just about grand ciphers, it's about the pervasive atmosphere of a world where secrets were everywhere. Consider the roles of ordinary individuals within the palace. A cook preparing a feast might arrange dishes on a platter in a specific, pre agreed order, each placement representing a letter or a number in a simple code. A gardener tending to the Sultan's cherished tulips might prune a certain number of petals from specific flowers to signal an event. Even the washerwomen sorting laundry could theoretically fold a piece of cloth in a particular way to convey a message to someone collecting it later. It's like a grand historical game of charades but with real-world consequences. This leveraging of everyday tasks for secret communication was effective precisely because it seemed so unremarkable. Who would suspect a simple laundry schedule of carrying vital intelligence? It allowed for messages to pass between individuals who might otherwise never have a moment of private conversation, all under the very noses of potential spies. This was especially crucial in an environment like the harem, where interactions were highly regulated and overt communication could be dangerous. One mainstream historical fact is that the Ottoman court was meticulously organized, with specific roles and duties for thousands of individuals, providing ample opportunities for subtle, nonverbal communication within established routines. This highly structured environment, ironically, created fertile ground for unconventional messaging. For a quirky tidbit, it's said that some palace servants would deliberately misplace certain items, a specific slipper in a particular room, or a unique piece of jewelry left on a designated cushion as a pre-arranged signal to an accomplice. It's like leaving a coded breadcrumb trail, but with more valuable crumbs. Historians still argue whether these informal methods of communication were primarily initiated by high-ranking officials for critical information, or if they were more often employed by lower-level servants and conspirators for personal intrigue or petty rebellion. Was it part of the official state security apparatus, or a more organic development from the bottom up? Perhaps both. You might see a vendor in the bustling market, ostensibly selling spices, but his hand gestures as he weighs out cinnamon are subtly different today. Is he just clumsy, or is he sending a coded message to the man across the way, seemingly engrossed in inspecting carpets? The beauty of these methods lay in their low-tech simplicity and their reliance on human ingenuity and observation. There were no complex machines to break, no elaborate code books to steal. The code was in the context, in the shared understanding between sender and receiver. It required sharp wits, good memory, and an intimate knowledge of the daily rhythms of the palace. It also meant that surveillance had to be equally sophisticated, not just looking for overt acts of espionage, but for these subtle deviations from the norm. It's enough to make you feel sleepy just thinking about all the silent signals floating around. In the shadowy world of Ottoman diplomacy and intelligence, the presence of spies and counter spies was a constant, almost tangible force. You feel the subtle shift in the atmosphere as we move from the relatively benign realm of internal palace communication to the high stakes game of international espionage. This wasn't just about protecting the Sultan's secrets, it was about uncovering the secrets of his rivals, a critical component of maintaining imperial power. It was a never ending, silent war fought with wits, deception, and the cunning use of information. The Ottoman Empire had its own sophisticated intelligence network, designed to gather information from across its vast territories and beyond. These agents, often disguised as merchants, dervishes, or even humble travelers, would infiltrate foreign courts, listen in on conversations in bustling bazaars, and observe troop movements. Their primary mission was to report back to Istanbul, providing the Sultan and his advisors with a clear picture of the geopolitical landscape. This intelligence was crucial for making informed decisions on matters of war, peace, and trade. Imagine being one of these spies, constantly under pressure, every interaction, a potential trap, every stranger, a possible enemy agent. It's like living in a perpetual spy thriller, but without the convenient plot twists. But just as the Ottomans had their spies, so too did their rivals, the Venetians, masters of maritime trade and diplomacy, were particularly adept at espionage, often employing their extensive network of merchants and consuls to gather intelligence. The Habsburgs, locked in a centuries long struggle for dominance with the Ottomans, also had their own intelligence services diligently working to unravel Ottoman plans. This created a constant cat and mouse game, a subtle dance of infiltration and counter infiltration, where the ability to decode a message or intercept a courier could mean the difference between victory and defeat. One mainstream historical fact is that foreign ambassadors in Istanbul were often under continuous surveillance by Ottoman intelligence, with their communications monitored and their movements tracked. This was not considered unusual, but rather a standard practice in the diplomatic world of the time. For a quirky tidbit, it's rumored that some Ottoman counter spies would employ double agents, individuals who feigned loyalty to a foreign power while secretly reporting back to the Sultan, adding another layer of deception to an already intricate web. Historians still argue whether the Ottoman intelligence network was more effective at defensive counter-espionage, protecting their own secrets, or offensive intelligence gathering, stealing the secrets of others. Was there strength in keeping things in, or in getting things out? Regardless, the constant threat of espionage pushed the Ottomans to refine their cryptographic methods even further. You might see a seemingly harmless coffee house, bustling with conversation, but one patron in the corner, nursing a strong cup of Turkish coffee, isn't just enjoying the ambiance. He's listening, analyzing, and perhaps preparing a coded report in his mind, ready to be dispatched to a far-off land. The air itself seems to thicken with unspoken questions, with the weight of unseen information. The ultimate test of any secret code is its ability to withstand attempts at decipherment. For the Ottomans, perpetually engaged in diplomatic and military skirmishes, the challenge of decoding the undecodable was a constant intellectual battle. You imagine the scene: a foreign spy, perhaps in a smoky back room in Venice, poring over an intercepted Ottoman message, his brow furrowed in concentration. He knows the fate of a potential military campaign might rest on his ability to unravel these seemingly random symbols. Early Ottoman ciphers, while initially effective, eventually faced the inevitable scrutiny of enemy cryptanalysts. The simpler substitution ciphers, where one letter consistently replaces another, were relatively easy to break using methods like frequency analysis. This technique involves counting the occurrences of each letter in the coded message and comparing them to the known frequency of letters in the language of the original text. For example, in English, E is the most common letter. So, if a particular symbol appears most frequently in a coded message, it's a good bet that symbol represents E. It's a bit like solving a complex word puzzle, but with much higher stakes than bragging rights. As cryptanalysts, became more sophisticated, so too did the Ottoman code makers. They moved beyond simple monoalphabetic substitution to more complex systems. One advancement was the use of polyalphabetic ciphers, where a single letter could be represented by different symbols depending on its position in the message or a specific key. This made frequency analysis much more difficult, as the relationship between original letters and their coded counterparts was no longer constant. Imagine trying to use frequency analysis on a message where A might sometimes be X, sometimes Q, and sometimes Z. It's enough to give a cryptanalyst an Ottoman sized headache. Another method involved the use of nulls, extra meaningless characters, added to the message to obscure the true length of the words or to confuse frequency counts. Or they might use homophones, where a single letter could be represented by multiple different symbols, further complicating attempts at decipherment. These techniques show a sophisticated understanding of the principles of cryptography, demonstrating that the Ottomans were not just passively using codes, but actively innovating to stay ahead of their adversaries. One mainstream historical fact is that Renaissance Europe saw a significant advancement in the art of cryptanalysis, particularly in Italian city-states like Venice, which developed sophisticated techniques for breaking ciphers, putting pressure on powers like the Ottomans to continually improve their own encryption methods. For a quirky tidbit, some Ottoman ciphers were so complex that they reportedly included decoys, entire sections of seemingly coded text that were deliberately meaningless, designed to waste the time and resources of enemy decoders. Imagine spending days, weeks, trying to crack a message, only to find out it was a complete red herring. Historians still argue whether the success of Ottoman cryptography was primarily due to the inherent strength of their cipher systems or the lack of truly dedicated and skilled cryptanalysts among their enemies in certain periods. Was it their brilliance or their rivals' occasional shortcomings? You might envision a highly skilled Ottoman cryptographer, his face illuminated by a flickering oil lamp, meticulously creating new, ever more intricate ciphers. He knows that every line of code he writes is a protective shield around the Empire's secrets, a silent defiance against those who would seek to unravel them. The struggle to break and to protect codes was a silent, intellectual arms race, fought with pen and paper, and the stakes were always the fate of empires. Within the tightly knit world of the Ottoman Sultanate, not everyone was privy to the empire's deepest secrets. The Sultan, naturally, stood at the apex of this pyramid of trust, but below him was a small, meticulously selected inner circle of individuals who held the keys to the empire's most sensitive communications. You imagine yourself as one of these highly favored few, burdened with the weight of vital knowledge, your life intertwined with the very security of the state. These were typically men of immense loyalty, keen intellect, and often exceptional scholarly abilities. The Grand Vizier, the Sultan's chief minister, was almost certainly part of this circle, as he was responsible for the day-to-day administration of the empire and the execution of the Sultan's commands. Other key figures might include the Rais ul Kutab, the head of the imperial chancery, who oversaw all state correspondence, or the Nishanchu, who was responsible for affixing the Sultan's tugra, imperial signature to documents and was deeply familiar with official protocols. These were not just bureaucrats, they were custodians of power and secrets. The trust placed in these individuals was absolute, and any breach of that trust would be met with the swiftest and most severe punishment. Their access to coded messages, their understanding of the various cipher keys, and their involvement in formulating secret strategies meant they were irreplaceable, yet perpetually under scrutiny. Imagine having a job where losing a single piece of paper, or even misplacing a thought, could cost you your head. It's like being a very important secret keeper, but with much more dramatic stakes than your neighbor's cookie recipe. One mainstream historical fact is that within the Ottoman court, the concept of loyalty was paramount, often trumping even familial ties in the Sultan's considerations for his inner circle. These trusted advisors frequently rose through the meritocratic system of the devshirme, a system that recruited talented Christian boys, converted them to Islam, and trained them for state service, ensuring their loyalty was primarily to the Sultan and the empire. For a quirky tidbit, some accounts suggest that members of this inner circle would sometimes be isolated in special chambers when deciphering or encoding particularly sensitive messages to prevent even accidental eavesdropping or lip reading. Historians still argue whether the Sultan's reliance on a small inner circle was primarily a strategic choice for security, or if it was also a reflection of an inherent paranoia regarding potential rivals and traitors within the broader court. Was it about efficiency or self preservation? You might observe two high ranking officials in what appears to be an informal discussion in a palace garden, their conversation light and amiable on the surface, but their eyes are sharp, their gestures subtle, and their words, while seemingly casual, might be conveying a coded understanding, a shared secret known only to those within the most intimate confines of the Sultan's trust. The air between them, though seemingly clear, is thick with unspoken knowledge. This concentrated flow of information ensured that only the most critical intelligence reached the Sultan directly, filtered and processed by those he trusted implicitly. It minimized the risk of widespread leaks and maintained a tight grip on information dissemination. It was a strategic decision to centralize secrecy, making the inner circle the true nerve center of Ottoman communication and counter-espionage. This structure allowed the Sultan to sleep soundly, knowing that his most dangerous secrets were in the hands of the very few, very loyal individuals who truly understood their immense weight. The Ottoman Empire, for all its splendor and military might, operated in a world largely devoid of what we would consider modern communication technology. You find yourself reflecting on this, realizing that the absence of electricity, radio, or even sophisticated mechanical ciphers meant that technology's role in secrecy was fundamentally different from today. It wasn't about silicon chips or complex algorithms. It was about human ingenuity and the clever manipulation of the available, often rudimentary, tools. Consider the simple tools at their disposal: quill and ink, parchment, wax seals, and perhaps specialized instruments for drawing cipher grids. The sophistication wasn't in the hardware, but in the software, the intricate rules, the memorized keys, the shared understanding between sender and receiver. This reliance on human minds rather than machines meant that the security of a message was ultimately tied to the loyalty and discretion of individuals. If a cryptographer was compromised or a trusted messenger betrayed his oath, no amount of clever coding could save the secret. It's like relying on a very smart person to be your firewall rather than a piece of antivirus software. However, even without electrical currents, there were advancements. The development of more stable and quick drying inks, for instance, could speed up the writing of coded messages. The improvement of paper quality meant that messages could be written more compactly and carried more easily. And while not technology in the modern sense, the mastery of horseback riding and the establishment of reliable postal routes, as we discussed earlier, were critical logistical advancements that facilitated the rapid, if still vulnerable, transmission of intelligence. One mainstream historical fact is that the development of paper manufacturing technology, particularly its widespread availability, played a crucial role in the dissemination of information and thus also in the methods used to secure it. Before paper, messages were often inscribed on more cumbersome materials like papyrus or vellum, limiting volume and ease of transport. For a quirky tidbit, some accounts suggest that certain highly secret messages were written using invisible inks derived from natural substances like lemon juice or milk, which would only become visible when heated. Imagine a spy holding a blank piece of parchment over a candle, watching the secret words magically appear. Historians still argue whether the perceived lack of technological advancements in Ottoman cryptography was a hindrance to their security or, paradoxically, made their methods more resilient to early forms of cryptanalysis, which often relied on mechanical aids or systematic approaches that were less effective against human centric ciphers. Was their low tech approach a weakness or a strength? You might see a highly skilled calligrapher not just writing beautifully, but with a specific, almost imperceptible tremor in his hand for certain letters, a prearranged signal known only to his counterpart. This isn't a machine, it's a human being, a master of his craft, turning art into an encrypted message. The limitations of the era meant that secrecy was a matter of clever design and human discipline. There were no secure servers to hack, no fiber optic cables to tap. Every message was a physical object, and its security depended on the ingenuity of its creation and the integrity of its transmission. This forced the Ottomans to think creatively, leading to the development of methods that were both ingenious and, for their time, remarkably effective in safeguarding the Sultan's secret code for sending messages. It's a testament to how far human cleverness can go even without a single microchip in sight. As the centuries turned, the Ottoman Empire's methods of secret communication, while still reliant on human ingenuity, left an indelible mark on the broader history of cryptography. You can now step back and appreciate the legacy of Ottoman cryptography, understanding how their innovations, born out of necessity, contributed to the ever evolving science of secure messaging. The Ottomans were not working in a vacuum. They were part of a global intellectual exchange learning from and contributing to the advancements in mathematics, linguistics, and statecraft that were occurring across the Islamic world and beyond. Their persistent need for robust security in a vast and often hostile geopolitical landscape forced them to push the boundaries of existing methods. This continuous innovation meant that their ciphers, especially during their golden age, were often considered among the most sophisticated of their time, particularly in their resistance to common cryptanalytic techniques. It's like they were always upgrading their secret handshake, making it harder and harder for anyone else to learn. Their emphasis on polyalphabetic substitution and the use of nulls and homophones, techniques that baffled many European decoders for generations, demonstrated a deep practical understanding of cryptographic principles. These weren't just random guesses, they were calculated strategies to increase the entropy of a message, making it harder to discern patterns. This intellectual rigor in code making was a significant contribution to the field, even if their specific ciphers are no longer in use today. One mainstream historical fact is that the extensive diplomatic exchanges between the Ottoman Empire and European powers often involved the use of sophisticated ciphers, leading to a kind of cryptographic arms race where each side tried to outwit the other. This constant competition spurred innovation on both sides. For a quirky tidbit, some historical documents suggest that the Ottomans occasionally incorporated elements of Arabic numerology into their codes, assigning numerical values to letters or phrases based on ancient mystical traditions, adding another layer of complexity that would be utterly baffling to an outsider. Historians still argue whether the long-term impact of Ottoman cryptographic achievements was more about practical application for imperial security, or if they contributed significantly to the theoretical understanding of cryptology that informed later developments in the field. Did they just make good locks, or did they help design better lock-picking tools by making stronger locks? You might consider the silent, unseen network of Ottoman scribes, scholars, and muezzins who, through their daily efforts, helped build a formidable system of secret communication, a testament to human ingenuity in the face of constant threats. The invisible ink, the subtle pauses in a chanted prayer, the cleverly arranged flowers, all these small details added up to a powerful legacy of secrecy. The Ottoman approach to cryptography serves as a reminder that the fundamentals of secure communication, the need for secrecy, the battle against interception, and the continuous evolution of methods are timeless. While the tools have changed from quill and parchment to fiber optics and quantum computing, the core challenges remain the same. The empire's commitment to protecting its secrets laid a foundational stone in the long and fascinating history of how humans have tried to whisper across vast distances without being overheard. Behind every successful code, every securely delivered message, stood a cadre of individuals who rarely received public acclaim. These were the unsung heroes of secrecy, the dedicated few who crafted, maintained, and often risked their lives for the Sultan's secret code. You pause to consider their quiet contributions, often overshadowed by the grand narratives of sultans and battles. Imagine the master cryptographer, a person of immense intellect and meticulous patience, working tirelessly in a secluded chamber, They weren't just following rules, they were creating them, constantly devising new substitution tables, new keys, and new methods to outwit the ever present threat of enemy decoders. Their work required not just mathematical acumen, but a deep understanding of linguistics and human psychology. They had to think like their adversaries, anticipating how a code might be attacked. They were the silent guardians of the Empire's mind. Their intellectual battles fought on parchment rather than battlefields. Then there were the trusted scribes, those who meticulously transcribed sensitive information into coded messages. This wasn't merely copying, it was a precise art. A single misplaced character, a moment of distraction, could render a message unintelligible or, worse, reveal its hidden meaning. Their hands moved with a quiet dedication, each stroke of the quill a precise act of encoding. They were the human printers of an era without printing presses, but with an added layer of secrecy embedded in their very craft. And of course, the loyal couriers and messengers who physically transported these invaluable secrets across vast and dangerous landscapes. They faced not just the perils of the journey, bandits, harsh weather, treacherous terrain, but the constant threat of capture and interrogation. Their loyalty was tested daily, their resilience pushed to the limit. They were the vital conduits, the human arteries through which the lifeblood of imperial information flowed. Imagine the sheer bravery, or perhaps the serene fatalism, required to carry a message that, if lost, could lead to your death or the ruin of an entire army. One mainstream historical fact is that many of these individuals, particularly the cryptographers and high level scribes, were often products of the highly meritocratic Ottoman education system, where talent was identified and nurtured regardless of social background. This ensured that the most capable minds were put to work in service of the empire. For a quirky tidbit, it's said that some of the most complex cipher keys were not written down at all, but instead committed to memory by a few select individuals, meaning the secret would literally die with them. Historians still argue whether the high level of loyalty and discretion among these individuals was primarily a result of their ideological commitment to the empire or the severe penalties for treason that ensured compliance. Was it love for the Sultan or fear of his wrath? You might reflect on the hundreds, perhaps thousands, of nameless individuals who played their part in the vast, unseen machinery of Ottoman communication. Their stories, often lost to the annals of history, were nevertheless crucial to the empire's endurance. Their quiet labor, a testament to the enduring human need to protect what is vital. Bringing our journey through the Sultan's secret code into the present day, you might find yourself wondering about the surprising modern echoes of old codes. While we no longer rely on muezzin calls or pigeon post, the fundamental principles that drove Ottoman cryptography are still very much alive, just in different forms. The human desire to send messages securely, to guard sensitive information, and to outwit those who seek to pry remains unchanged. Consider the basic concept of a substitution cipher, where one character is replaced by another. This simple idea, used by the Ottomans, is the granddaddy of all modern encryption. When you send an encrypted message today, whether it's an email, a text message, or an online purchase, it's essentially a vastly more complex version of a substitution cipher. Instead of just replacing letters, modern encryption algorithms scramble data using incredibly long and complex keys, transforming your readable information into seemingly random strings of numbers and symbols. It's like the Ottoman code, but with so many layers, it would take a supercomputer millennia to unravel. The concept of steganography, hiding a message in plain sight, also finds a modern counterpart. Remember how the Ottomans might use subtle gestures or object placement? Today, digital steganography allows people to hide messages within image files, audio tracks, or even video streams. An ordinary looking photograph, when analyzed with the right software, might contain a hidden message. It's the digital equivalent of a sultan's gardener arranging specific flowers to send a secret signal, only now it's pixelated petals doing the work. Even the cat and mouse game between spies and counter spies, so prevalent in the Ottoman era, continues unabated. Governments and corporations spend billions on cybersecurity, constantly developing new encryption methods while simultaneously trying to break those of their adversaries. The intelligence agencies of today are the direct descendants of the Ottoman spy masters, just armed with far more advanced tools. The only difference is, instead of intercepting a dusty scroll, they're intercepting data packets zipping through the internet. One mainstream historical fact is that the fundamental cryptographic techniques developed centuries ago, such as substitution and transposition, form the bedrock upon which all modern complex encryption algorithms are built, albeit scaled to an unimaginable level of complexity. For a quirky tidbit, did you know that during World War II, some Allied forces used Native American languages, particularly Navajo, as a form of unbreakable code, similar to how the Ottomans might have leveraged obscure cultural nuances? It was a human cipher, virtually impossible for the enemy to understand. Historians still argue whether the increasing complexity of modern digital encryption makes societies more secure or simply pushes the methods of espionage into even more clandestine and sophisticated realms. Are we truly safer, or just playing a more complex game of hide and seek? You might reflect on how the timeless struggle to protect secrets continues. The whispers of the past, encoded in subtle variations of a muezzin's call, now echo in the silent, rapid-fire encryption of billions of digital messages every second. The basic human need for privacy and security endures, an unbroken chain from the Ottoman Sultan's palace to your own digital devices. As our journey through the Sultan's secret world comes to a close, you feel the gentle tug of sleep, pulling you deeper into a realm of quiet contentment. The grand palace fades, its secrets settling into the folds of history, much like the soft shadows that now stretch across your room. The urgency of imperial communication, the silent battles of wits, all recede, leaving behind a tranquil hum. Imagine the Ottoman Sultan, in his own time, similarly seeking repose after a long day of ruling an empire. The weight of his decisions, the endless streams of information, both open and coded, would finally begin to lighten. He would lay down, perhaps on plush cushions, the scent of rosewater lingering in the air, and the distant murmur of the city his only lullaby. His mind once alight with strategies and secrets, would slowly calm, drifting from the complexities of statecraft to the simple, rhythmic breath of sleep. The very notion of secrets, of messages hidden and revealed, becomes a gentle whisper now, a story told in the quiet hours. The muezzin's call, once a potential conduit for vital intelligence, returns to its pure, sacred form, a comforting sound that marks the passage of time. The rustle of a scribe's parchment, the clinking of a chai glass, the subtle movements of a palace guard. All the small details that once held hidden meanings now dissolve into the soothing backdrop of a fading dream. The anxieties of interception, the pressure of deciphering enemy plots, the constant dance of spies and counter spies. These are worries of the waking world, of the bustling day. But as the night deepens, they lose their sharp edges, transforming into the soft, indistinct hum of a bygone era. You are not a courier racing across a perilous desert, nor a cryptographer wrestling with an unbreakable code. You are simply a traveler in time, having glimpsed a fascinating corner of history, now ready to rest. The Sultan, too, would surrender to the quietude, his empire's secrets safely guarded for another night by the diligence of his trusted few. The hidden messages, whether carried by human hands, whispered in a call to prayer, or subtly embedded in daily routines, have done their work. They have kept the empire running, secured its borders, and allowed its ruler to finally find peace. Now, it is your turn. Let the gentle echoes of those ancient secrets lull you as the soft darkness embraces you fully.